So with that, we'll be opening the select board meeting now. So welcome to the July 27th select board meeting. Please note that in accordance with the emergency orders announced by Governor Charlie Baker to protect public health during COVID-19 outbreak, this select board meeting will not be open to the public for physical attendance, and the select board members are meeting online via Zoom web conference. The meeting is being live streamed and cable broadcast by the Easton Community Access Television, Comcast 98, Verizon 23, and on ECAT's website, www.eastoncat.org. If you're watching this at home and you have a question or a comment, you can email Michael Blanchard, M as in Michael Blanchard at easton.ma.us, or you can pose your question in the Q&A feature of the Zoom portal. Please remember to include your name and street address for our minutes. At this time, I'd like to ask each select board member to state their name to ensure that we have a quorum.
Craig Barger.
Chuck King.
Mark Lamb.
And I'm Dottie Fulginiti. So great. The first item that we have on the agenda is the Purple Heart Proclamation. We have Corey Ahonen, our Veteran Services Officer, here to just tell us a little bit about that. And then when Corey is done, I've asked Chuck to read the proclamation. As Chuck's a veteran and these veterans issues, we always like Chuck to host those. They're very near and dear to all of our hearts, but especially Chuck.
Dottie, if I could just quickly, we're going to do something a little bit more formal with Director Kennedy at either your 10th or 24th of August meeting, talking about the reorganization we did with Health and Community Services as part of a budget for fiscal 21. But I just wanted to kind of reintroduce Corey as he's now the Deputy Director of Health and Community Services for Veterans and Financial Affairs. So.
Oh, that's great. Congratulations.
Congratulations, Corey.
Thank you. Thank you, Connor. How are you all tonight?
Good, thank
Great.
you.
Oh, thank
Good.
You for coming.
No problem. Thank you for having me. So just real quick, I just wanted to kind of just reiterate what we do each year with the Purple Heart Day, National Purple Heart Day coming up. So the Purple Heart Medal is awarded to members of the Armed Forces of the United States who are wounded by an instrument of war in the hands of the enemy, and posthumously to the next of kin in the name of those who are killed in action or die of wounds received in action. It is specifically a combat decoration. We have several Purple Heart recipients in town, a few of which we heard at last year's ceremony, and it's kind of been a goal to bring those stories to our residents and kind of put some stories to those names and faces, and just kind of bring those things to light, the achievements that these people go on to still remain and serve in our community, things like that. And it's been an honor and a privilege to have them involved. But unfortunately, this year, we're going to be keeping the ceremony somewhat more simple than it has been in the past. And I'll still be raising the flag, the Purple Heart flag that gets raised along with the United States flag at the town office's flagpole. And it's raised for the period of the day. And I'll be working on coordinating with ECAT to get that properly broadcast as well. So yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, just Friday, August 7th, National Purple Heart Day. We'll be raising the flag, and when you walk by, just please take a moment to reflect on the courage that that symbol represents.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
I have
you.
a question. Is anybody allowed to be there?
It's well, the
I asked
flagpole,
because I've seen other towns and government bodies get together for certain things, and this is something that I would love to be there for. I would just like to be there, and I don't know if I'm allowed to be there.
I understand. Yeah, I didn't really make the decision like lightly. I kind of thought of, we were trying to avoid encouraging people to come out, and
Right.
even if they practice social distancing and wear masks, I still have found that the things that I've participated in, the drive-by birthday for the World War II veteran, you still get people that, they shake hands, they want to talk to each other. And I thought just to kind of mitigate that, that we would keep it as a virtual ceremony this year. But I think officially we could include anyone from the select board. If you'd like to offline, I could come up with some way to involve you in the virtual ceremony if you'd like. I want to eliminate the risk of public kind of just
Understood.
taking it upon themselves. So would you like me to connect
I
with
would
you?
if it's okay with
Absolutely.
then yes. Okay.
Connor, is that agreeable or?
Sure. Whatever you and Kristen want to work out is perfectly
Okay.
fine.
All right, I'll speak to Kristen. Thank you.
Chuck, if you'd like to read the proclamation.
Thank you. Town of Easton Proclamation, Purple Heart Town, August 7th, 2020. Whereas the people of the town of Easton have great admiration and the utmost gratitude for all the men and women who have selflessly served their country and this community in the armed forces for the good of all. And whereas contributions and sacrifices of the men and women from Easton who served in harm's way in the armed forces have been vital in maintaining the freedom and the way of life enjoyed by our citizens. And whereas citizens of our community have been killed in action while serving in the armed forces and have been posthumously awarded the Purple Heart for their ultimate sacrifice. And whereas citizens of our community have been awarded the Purple Heart for their bodily sacrifice for being wounded in action while engaged in combat. And whereas the Purple Heart is the oldest American military decoration in present use and was created as the badge of military merit on August 7, 1782 in Newburgh, New York by General George Washington. Initially, it was made of purple cloth shaped as a heart with the word merit sewn upon it. And whereas the heritage it represents is sacred to those who know the price paid to wear the Purple Heart. And whereas August 7th is nationally recognized as Purple Heart Appreciation Day, and now therefore be it proclaimed, we, the Easton Board of Selectmen, on behalf of the town of Easton, go on record to hereby proclaim Easton, Massachusetts, a Purple Heart town, honoring the service and sacrifice of our nation's men and women in uniform that were wounded or killed by the enemy while serving to protect the freedoms enjoyed by all Americans. Also, be it proclaimed, we, the town of Easton, will recognize August 7th annually as Purple Heart Day and urge the people and organizations of Easton to display the American flag as well as other public expressions of recognition of our Purple Heart recipients. I have a few personal words. There's a lot of whereases, but I guess that's for the purpose of making it official, but there's a lot of meat and potatoes in between as well. I just wrote down some of my thoughts. Who was awarded the Purple Heart? Citizens of our community who have been killed in action while serving in the armed forces, awarded posthumously. And who else? Those who survived. Why was it awarded to those who survived? It was awarded for their bodily sacrifice of being wounded in action while engaged in combat. The heritage it represents is sacred to those who know the price paid to wear it. It is a price forged by serving in harm's way for the purpose of maintaining the freedom and the way of life enjoyed by our citizens even today. It's a price forged while engaged in combat, whether it was on Iwo Jima of World War II or at the Battle of Chosin Reservoir in Korea or Hamburger Hill in Vietnam. I have attended many holidays of commemoration for our veterans. Veterans Day, which honors all veterans, Memorial Day, which honors those who died for our country's freedoms, and Purple Heart Day, which blankets together those injured in combat who survived with those who didn't. I know I share with the citizens of our town the deepest regard and respect for those who were killed or wounded in action. Thank you, Corey, and thank you, Dottie.
Excellent.
Thank you.
So much, Chuck. Very well said. Craig, did you have a comment?
I just thought that was excellent. Thank you, Chuck.
Thanks.
Terrific. And thank you for being here tonight, Corey. And we look forward to hearing more about your new role.
Great, thank you.
All
See
right.
you, Corey.
Good night, Corey.
Have a good evening.
On to our next item, discussion and vote regarding a retainer agreement with attorney Harold P. Naughton Jr. and the law firm of Napoli, PLLC for the town of Easton to join with the National Rural Water Association and others as plaintiffs in a class action complaint against per and polyfluoroalkyl, I'll never be able to say that word right, substances, otherwise known as PFAS, manufacturers 3M Company, EI DuPont, NEMOURS and Company, etc. Connor, if you could lead us into this introduction.
Sure. So two things. One, I just put up a little visual to try to be more brief than I will be verbally, just for folks who are watching at home. And I'm happy to introduce attorney Hank Naughton as well as tonight's subject. So as the board is aware, Easton's been working on proactively planning for long-term treatment solutions for PFAS in our water supply. This follows testing. The town did test for PFAS under the EPA UCMR3 back in 2014. Back then, that was on the part per billion scale. There was no detect at that time on that scale. As part of rebuilding one of our wells about 13 or 14 months ago, the town began testing at the new part per trillion scale for PFAS. Despite that, there was no regulation from the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection to require that at the time. And to our surprise, we found that there were 3 of our wells hit above 20 parts per trillion, which was a significant number because that was at the time being discussed as a possible regulatory threshold for what's called a maximum contaminant level. And so we worked with the DEP at that time and brought them to a public meeting with the select board as water commissioners back in November to give a pretty detailed presentation on where the DEP was going with their state level rulemaking on this topic, as well as what the town of Easton was planning to do in advance of that regulation being issued. So at that meeting, we launched a home rebate program for folks who before we are able to stand up any kind of permanent treatment, felt that they would like PFAS filter in their home. So we offer rebates up to $75 for folks to put those in their homes. We submitted substantial commentary to DEP in February of this year during the comment period of their rulemaking for that regulation, not contesting the validity or desire to regulate that, just pointing out the obvious that, municipal governments and water districts did not put PFAS in their own water supplies, yet we are bearing the financial burden of treating for these. And in this case, in Easton, obviously we are still far out from having any kind of construction cost or knowing if that's the exact route we need to take, but we're talking on the scale of multiple millions of dollars for any type of carbon filtration system for treatment, and that's going to be the case in an increasing amount of municipalities throughout the Commonwealth once they start testing. So that regulation that I referred to in 2019, which did not yet exist at the time, has now gone into effect. And communities the size of Easton, unless they change this date, don't even need to start testing on this level till October of this year. So there's a lot of communities out there who just simply haven't looked with as fine of a microscope, so to speak. And when many of them do, unfortunately, a lot of them are probably going to end up being surprised like we were. So that's a kind of a long segue of explaining that we worked with DEP. We saw that this regulation was coming. We didn't dig in our heels and say, well, we're going to wait till we're forced to do something. And we started planning right away. We launched those immediate options last fall. And at that time, identified what our medium-term plans were going to be, which includes testing and publication of our results, seeking capital funding for PFAS preparedness, studies for engineering for the town to look at long-term solutions, as well as staying engaged on policy and financial planning matters, applying for grant funding and things of that nature. And so in addition to all that, DPW Director Field and Water Operations Manager Tierney brought to my attention right before the state of emergency for COVID was declared that the National Rural Water Association was signing on to a class action lawsuit against manufacturers of PFAS, more notably 3M and DuPont. And we reviewed that in the spring months with council, met with attorney Hank Naughton of Napoli Shkolnik, who are leading this. And I've asked Hank to come to this meeting tonight, and I'm recommending to the board that you execute a retainer agreement with his firm to join Easton with two separate items. One is the class action under the kind of National Rural Water Association, the NRWA. And the other is a multi-district litigation package against the manufacturers of PFAS as well. Executing the agreement will bring us on board with both. And I'd ask Attorney Naughton just to kind of give an overview, introduce yourself, your firm, and just kind of the 10,000-foot view of what the implications of this litigative actions are to the board.
Great. Connor, thank you very much. You gave a very thorough and precise, and working with you for the past few weeks, I think that's a pretty good way to describe the way you operate your office. I think your board is lucky to have you with them, Madam Chair, and through you to your members. My name is Hank Naughton. I'm an attorney here in Massachusetts, and I am currently of counsel with Napoli Shkolnik of New York, and will soon be joining as managing partner of their public client affairs group and managing partner of the Boston office that they will be opening over the next few months. I'll get back. That's important and significant to this presentation. Connor is absolutely right. When the DEP regulations are fully implemented, there will be many cities and towns that are going to find themselves in the position that their tests will not be good news. I compliment Easton on being as proactive as you have been in the early testing and in reaching out and trying to determine what you can do on behalf of your constituents, of your ratepayers, of your water users. Napoli Shkolnik has been in existence for about 30 years. Our named partner, Paul Napoli, has been chosen as one of the co-lead counsels in the multi-district litigation that is going on where cases have been consolidated from around the country in Charleston, South Carolina. There are about 500 plaintiffs against the defendants, many of whom Connor read to you right now. The case has been in existence since early 2018. In addition to that case, we were brought on as preferred counsel for National Rural Water Association just over a year ago. The National Rural Water Association has 31,000 members around the country, from small members of, we don't discriminate on size, Madrona Beach, Washington, which has 38 households, just became a client, but it goes all the way up to, even though it's the Rural Water Association, they also represent Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, with several 100,000 people. So we are counsel for National Rural Water. We have filed on the behalf of their 31,000 members a class action lawsuit in the district court of the District of Columbia. That case is proceeding on a parallel track, using the same evidence against these same defendants as the case in South Carolina. That case eventually will likely be combined with the case in South Carolina, but right now proceeding on a parallel track. As for my firm, we're very experienced at handling mass torts like this on a national level. Hunter Shkolnik, our other named partner, is co-lead counsel in the opioid litigation that is proceeding in Cleveland right now against Big Pharma. One of the cases that's actually been resolved there for Cuyahoga County Cuyahoga County is our client. We go back into the 90s, representing large-scale groups of public entities that are affected by pollution, MTBE, as in the gasoline pollution on large communities on Long Island. Our firm has represented the first responders to 9/11, the New York City detective Alvarez, who many of us saw on television with Jon Stewart last fall and unfortunately since passed away, was a client along with many other 9/11 responders with Paul Napoli. I mentioned these previous cases not as a way of marketing, but as a way to demonstrate that our firm has the commitment to the public safety and public health of communities around the country. We also have the resources to support litigation like this. If that wasn't true, Paul Napoli would not have been brought on board as co-lead counsel. What I think is significant, and I alluded to it at the beginning, because of what we feel will be a significant number of clients in the Northeast and especially in Massachusetts when these DEP regulations get implemented and equivalent regulations get implemented around New England, Napoli has decided that we will open a Boston office, a Boston branch, of which I'll be the incoming lead partner when the world opens up a little bit. I think that's significant for the town of Easton because you'll basically have local counsel that will be leading this litigation for you. But you also have the national reach of Napoli Shkolnik. And one of those elements that I think will be helpful or has been helpful, say in the case of Somerville, Georgia, right now, who we represent, whose entire water supply has been shut down. They needed help with media relations and emergency response, and we were able to put that together for them and help them. So all of those elements, I would strongly suggest would be very helpful going forward on behalf of the town of Easton as we go proceed with both of these tracks of litigation. The goal of the litigation, as with any litigation like this, is settlement. We try to avoid trial. And in the settlement, we see it two-part, bifurcated to an extent, that the makers provide funding for towns and cities to do the testing to find out specifically how bad they've been impacted. And second to that, when that testing is done and when the results are shown, what needs to be done to clean up the water supplies. You guys have been proactive, reaching out to your townspeople, offering them the filtration systems. But eventually you'll need gigantic filtration systems for your town. And our goal through either settlement or going to trial and getting a judgment is to set up a system by which your town will be able to apply for settlement monies to build a large-scale filtration system for your town once the results of the PFAS testing is done. So that's kind of in a nutshell where we've been going the last few years. Very happy another resource we bring in, and Connor, as well as Mr. Field, Mr. Tierney met Walter Hang. We have a company called Toxics Targeting, which is the leading company in the country that has done research on the impact of PFAS into water systems such as yours. And Walter Hang is who runs that company, is on full-time retainer to Napoli Shkolnik. That is part of our service. It doesn't add anything to the fees that are charged to the towns. I mean, the fee is articulated in the retainer agreement. So.
Well, thank you. I'm going to open this up to the board members, and I'm just going to ask the people that are in as attendees, if you have any comments or questions, please type them into the Q&A. And I do have one, and I'll hold that question until we have all the board members comment. So Craig, if you want to go first.
It's Craig Barger, attorney, Naughton. I just have a question about, tell us a little bit more about the retainer and how that works.
Sure. Honestly, for a case this big, it's pretty simple. Any settlement that we get for the town of Easton, the firm gets 25%. If there are other costs which are articulated in the retainer, those would be deducted off the top, but we don't truly anticipate much other costs over and above because of where there will be some effort on behalf of the town is our investigators would need to sit with, will likely need to sit with Mr. Field and your other DPW employees to go through the records that your town's already put together. That to an extent would be the investment of the town. But in part because the town's been so proactive and has already done a significant amount of research, we are asking for a simple retainer of 25% of any settlement that we bring back to the town.
Thank you. Do you have any sense of how lengthy this process may be?
I wish I did, Mr. Barger. The case is, quite honestly, in the grand scheme of things, it's 2 years old, which counsel will tell you is still a relatively immature case in MDL and in class action world. 3 to 5 years is what we've seen in the past in cases like this. The PG&E case, which is somewhat comparable out in California, took about 7 years to resolve. We don't anticipate that here.
Thank you, Mr. Naughton.
Thank you.
I have I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to go through the roll call. Chuck, do you have any questions or comments?
You're muted, Chuck.
I guess I would leapfrog off of what Greg asked, and Attorney Naughton, does it make any difference whether one is a large client like Oklahoma City or a small one with 31 people? It doesn't make any difference in that regard, right? It makes more of a difference in terms of whether they've been proactive or the nature of how PFAS has affected them thus far?
Yes, Chuck, Mr. King, I can answer that in a couple of ways. The vision of a settlement here is that a settlement fund will be set up and that each entity that's a plaintiff will apply with the evidence that we've gathered and the indicia of how damaged their system is, will apply to that fund for monies to rebuild their water system or to get the filtration plant built in their towns. The formula by which that will be distributed would be decided by the court upon advice and upon argument by the lawyers at a later stage of the case. So that's kind of the first answer. We're envisioning kind of a compensation system, and that's actually the example I use would be Ken Feinberg and the compensation system for the victims of 9/11 that went through an application process. Secondly, though, and as I referred to, although there are 500 clients right now, 500 plaintiffs right now, it is still an immature case, and we anticipate many other water districts and municipalities will be joining. As we saw in the opioid case in Cleveland, plaintiffs that were in early were in line for early settlements, because the case could be broken up by date, by size of water district, by impact, by damages. Again, because it's an immature case, it still remains to be seen. But it's not to sound cliche, but it's always good to be in early. And really, in the scheme of things, if Easton does execute this, you will be in early in this case. I hope that.
Thank you. Thank you. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Mark?
So, my question is, are there other class action lawsuits that other firms have against these manufacturers, these plaintiffs, and how do they play out? I ask because, the discovery of PFAS in our water, depending upon how long you've been looking at it, is relatively new, meaning, in the past 10 years, though it's, the discovery could have been before then, but it wasn't like it is now, how it is, it's a crisis. Right. So are there other class action lawsuits against these plaintiffs? How far along are they? How has the success been? Because I don't anticipate whatsoever 3M and DuPont, with their literally billions of dollars in finances, will just lay down and take it.
Well, people said that about the big pharma as well, and two counties in Ohio have gotten about $264 million apiece. It's part of your answer. I don't have a specific answer to other ongoing class action lawsuits right now. That I can certainly research and get back to you. What I can say is there are strength in numbers, and 3M and DuPont and the rest. If this, right now we have 500 plaintiffs. If that increases to 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 plaintiffs as members of the National Rural Water Association continue to address us, come to see us, Therein lies the pressure on these defendants, as well as state DEPs. The state DEP in New York is currently talking about dropping their maximum contaminant level to 3 parts per trillion. When pressure like that starts up, if there is a change in administration and an activist EPA comes in to existence in Washington and starts talking about a national effort against these companies, the last NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act, because a lot of the impacted communities are in the area of military bases. And Chuck, before we leave, I'm going to address your because I have a personal thought on your comments about the Purple Hearts. We have to make sure to tell people, as a veteran myself, we are not going after the Department of Defense. We are not going after the U.S. government. We are not going after these air bases. But the last 2 go-arounds, the National Defense Authorization Act, the members on the Democratic side did try to impose new guidelines that would impact the towns around those air bases. Unfortunately, with the situation in Washington, it was not successful. But I think between state action, between the litigation, and between a potential activist EPA and a new administration, I think you'll see these companies want this resolved sooner rather than later.
And
Not going away.
No, they're not going away. No, I agree with you there 100%.
So I have and then we do have a question that's an attendee. My first question is, this lists 2 manufacturers because they're the 2 biggest, but is there the potential to add other manufacturers during this process, or will this stick to those 2?
Oh, I'm not sure where you're looking. There's a significant number of manufacturers that are defendants in this suit. I think upwards of 18.
Okay.
And yes, I think we found them all at this stage. But if we find more, you can always move to add defendants to a lawsuit at this level.
All right. My next question is this really just limited to financial compensation? When I watched the movie Dark Waters, this has been going on for years. And as people probably know, the PFAS chemical chain, right now they're looking at a handful of these harmful elements, but as that chain moves and changes, there's still more elements out there that need to be accounted for. Is there an opportunity to force them to stop producing the materials in the first place so they don't just change a couple of molecules and call it something different and keep putting out the same toxic materials?
Well, that's always one of the goals of litigation, is to prevent further production of the harmful chemical. And that would, I believe, I think you've seen it with DuPont, who spun off a couple of their subsidiaries, which then just made them defendants in this. But that's always one of the goals of broad-scale litigation like this, is to prevent the continued production of the product.
Okay, great. Our audience question is from Kyla Bennett, 2 Chickadee Lane. He's asking, what other Massachusetts municipalities are joining the lawsuit?
We have, right now, we have Methuen, Massachusetts, and I am in negotiations with at least 7 other municipalities as we speak, that because negotiations are ongoing, I am not at liberty to discuss. There are, as I said, approximately 500 defendants right now. Napoli, Shkolnik represents approximately a quarter of those. Again, I like to argue that this goes in the town's favor because we have seen the need for representation in Massachusetts and New England beyond that, but Massachusetts specifically. That's why Napoli has decided to open a bricks and mortar office here in Massachusetts. So And I'm looking forward to leading that effort here.
Connor or David Field, do you have anything that you want to add, or?
Sure. So Hank, just to confirm, so someone beat us to the punch then, and it was Methuen?
Jim Jajuga was a pretty proactive mayor. He's not there anymore, but he's up your way, Council.
So, but Easton would be one of the first municipalities joining on this class action with your firm, right?
Yes.
And so a couple of points I wanted to touch on that were brought up by a few members of the board as far that you also made, Attorney Naughton, as far as the amount of people who are signing on. Back in February, and perhaps this has changed since then, I haven't gone into the data portal, we've been busy with COVID, but back in February when we were submitting comments to the DEP, I went and dug through their public testing data, and at that time it indicated that only about 10% of public water supplies in Massachusetts had tested for PFAS on a part per trillion scale. And after seeing, and we heard this at public hearings that I believe the citizen who asked the question was also at, we overheard other water districts at the rule hearings from a DEP saying that they would not be testing until forced under the regulation after seeing the level of attention this was getting in towns like Easton. We obviously take the tact of being proactive here, but at that time, 9 out of 10 water districts in the state they just basically hadn't looked.
Right.
And so as these regulations go into effect and folks start testing, there is very likely going to be a lot of people looking at a multi-million-dollar infrastructure problem on the statewide level, potentially multi-billion, with no way to fund it absent large rate increases. Now the prospect of large rate increases and double-digit unemployment, right, becomes even less attractive. So hopefully Easton and Methuen do not end up being the only municipalities in Massachusetts joining, and I have a feeling we will not be, because that small handful of public water supplies in the state who did actually test for PFAS on a part per trillion scale, looking at the data back in February, depending on how you count, roughly 40 to 60% of them had PFAS over 20 parts per trillion. So it's not just a function that a lot of folks haven't looked. It's also a function of the fact that when the people who have looked did, almost half of them had it above this very fine level. And so I would be unsurprised if that continues throughout the state as people start kind of lifting the rocks up and looking. And so that's part of a reason why Dave and I thought it was good to bring this forward now.
No, Connor, again, not to gild the lily, but I compliment you and your board on their proactivity and your council. This, I think, once the DEP regs get fully implemented, there's going to be a rush for the doors. And I'm critical of no one. But I was on the phone with a water district today who literally, I mean, we have indications, but literally have no intention of doing any testing until they're fully ordered. And I think that's, I just don't think that's a good idea. I'm not going to be critical of them, but I think this is coming one way or another, and I'd always rather be, towards the front of the line than the end of the line, things like this. Because I do think, and in part, one of the reasons, and it's really just white space. I'm transitioning from my previous life into full-time with Napoli Shkolnik, and it's just the white space that I've had up here and get in, and COVID, quite honestly, as well. I always prefer getting together with boards in person and be able to kind of discuss the room. I find it more successful. So COVID slowed us down in signing times up in Massachusetts too. But I do anticipate over the next 6 to 12 months, the number of clients will increase dramatically.
Okay, we one other question here, again, from Dr. Kyla Bennett. I do want to say before I mention this that our community has been very interested in this and very active in it. So when we share our thanks to everybody that was involved, I want to thank the community for being so interested in this and acting as advocates to make sure that we are looking at it. And Dr. Bennett works with PEER. I don't remember what the acronym stands for, but she has another question. She's a scientist and an attorney that's been really the face of PFAS in our state. And she wanted to know if you had a contact that you can give us for media purposes, and also for us to share the results of towns that PEER has tested. I'll give you more information.
Might I give that contact to Connor offline?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right.
I'll forward that to Kyle.
Great, thank you so much. Well, if there's no other comments or questions, we would like to take a vote to enter into a retainer agreement with Attorney Naughton and his law firm to join with the National Rural Water Association and others as plaintiffs in this class action lawsuit.
So moved, Craig Barger.
Second, Chuck King.
And a roll call vote?
Barger, yes.
King, yes.
Lamb, yes.
Fulginiti, yes. Thank you. And thank you, Attorney Naughton. We appreciate you coming in and spending time with us, and thank you for your patience.
No, I thank you. I look forward to working with you. I almost fell out of my chair because I was watching for a while, and then did you actually go back to like a January 27th? I swear I heard you say, oh, we're going to go back to a January 27 minutes to amend them or something. And I said, oh, geez, did I go into like a recording? And I went off and then I came right back on. So you scared me. No, I'm looking forward to doing business and working very closely and directly with the town. Let me say, I'm a multi-tour veteran of both Iraq and Afghanistan. And I just want to say, I'm proud to work with the town that took that vote and was so eloquent about Purple Heart recipients. Chuck, thank you for your service and your words. So you spoke of Iwo Jima. I have a dear friend, Walter Miz O'Malley. He's 94 years old. Received two Purple Hearts, one at Iwo Jima and one at Saipan. And I try to stop in every now and then and have a beer with him. And I did yesterday. I was in his neighborhood, and he's as sharp as a tack. And he still remembers stories, but he's one of those great Americans that we think of when you have events like that. So I want to congratulate your town on that, and I'm honored to be on your team. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for recognizing that, and thank you for your service as well.
I need to say thank you. Yep.
All right.
Connor, I'll be in touch. I'll send you that media contact.
Great, thank you.
All right, guys, then I think that's all for me tonight, so I'll sign off as well.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you,
Good night,
Kate.
Kate. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Good night.
Good night.
All right, our next item on the agenda is a one-day liquor license for Rosemary Fresh, our table dinner party at Oaks Ames Memorial Hall on the veranda loggia and surrounding areas outside at 3 Barrows Street, Easton. The event date is Saturday, August 8th, 2020. Just trying to look at my notes here. The applicant Meredith Bonney applied for a one-day beer and wine liquor license for an Our Table dinner party event to be held Saturday, August 8th at Oaks Ames Hall as described from 6 p.m. to 11 p.m. An Easton police detail is not required for this event. And I'm just trying to see, is Ms. Bonney here or? No.
Does not look like it.
All right. This was an invitation only, I believe, event. If anyone has any comments or questions, if not, I'll take a motion to approve the one-day liquor license, or the one-day beer and wine liquor license.
So moved.
Second.
Chuck and Craig, and a roll call vote.
Barger, yes.
King, yes.
Lamb, yes.
Fulginiti, yes. Thank you. Next is a Commission on Disability appointment. This is uncontested, and the applicant is Allan Katz. We had his application in the packet. Anybody have any comments or questions? If somebody would like to make the motion in a second and a roll call vote.
So moved, Craig Barger.
Second, King.
Barger, Katz.
King, Katz.
Lamb, Katz.
And Fulginiti, Katz. Thank you. We have a road closure request. Oliver Ames High School graduation ceremony on Lothrop Street from Randall Street to Sheridan Street and access road behind the middle school, Saturday, August 1st, 2020. The rain date is Sunday, August 2nd, 2020. Is there any more information on that, Connor?
There's a memo in your packet that was submitted by Oliver Ames High School Principal Wes Paul. This was reviewed by Public Safety, I believe, working with Assistant Town Administrator Mike Blanchard. The schools are also working with Director of Health and Community Services, Kristen Kennedy, and the Board of Health to work through. I believe they may already have gone to the Board of Health and received approval for social distancing and public health concerns associated with the graduation itself. So I would recommend approval of a road closure as described in Wes Paul's memo.
Okay, and the time on this is 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Somebody like to make a motion?
So moved. King.
Second, Barger.
So that's Chuck and Craig, and a roll call vote, starting with you, Craig.
Barger, yes.
King, yes.
Lamb, yes.
Fulginiti, yes. Next is another road closure request, a neighborhood social distancing get-together, 39 Vineyard Place to 15 Vineyard Place on Saturday, August 8th, 2020. We did receive a map and a request from Paul DiNicolo for a neighborhood social distancing get-together on Saturday, August 8th from 4 p.m. to 9 p.m. The area in the block for closure begins at 39 Vineyard Place to 15 Vineyard Place, allowing families to walk freely and safely from their residences to the area where a band will be based. The event will involve only residents of the neighborhood. Each family will be responsible for their own food and preparation. No police officer is necessary, and the residents will use their personal vehicles to block off the street as requested. The request has been circulated to Public Safety, the Department of Public Works, and Health and Community Services. The Public Safety and DPW have confirmed no issues, noting that the street must stay passable for emergency vehicles. Director of Health and Community Services, Kristen Kennedy, has requested that the organizers stress proper social distancing and/or masks be worn, and that a person be assigned to collect attendee information for contact tracing should the need arrive. So we recommend approval with the requested road closure with Kristen Kennedy, Director Kennedy's COVID-19 conditions. So if I
By invitation only for just those people in the neighborhood, so that how are they going to manage, Connor, how are they going to manage if somebody decides they want to come that's not part of the neighborhood?
I don't have an answer to that. They would be required to keep a list of attendees for themselves in the event that there was any kind of confirmed coronavirus for anyone who was there. So I would imagine that as part of their collecting of the attendee information, that would make itself known because it needs their address.
Any other comments, questions? Can I get a motion in a second?
So moved.
Second, King.
That's Mark and Chuck, and a roll call vote. Craig?
Barger, yes.
King, yes.
Lamb, yes.
Fulginiti, yes. Next, presentation of the Traffic Safety Committee report on Turnpike Street and High Street. We have an email that was submitted by a resident, Tiffany DeRoche, and a memo submitted by the Traffic Safety Commissioner of their review and evaluation of the complaint regarding excessive speed, noise, and vibration caused by trucks in the area of Turnpike Street and High Street. After review by the Traffic Safety Commission and the reasons stated in the memo, the Traffic Safety Commission does not recommend taking any action relative to speed or trucks at this time. Our Public Works Director, David Field, will present the report, and I believe that the citizen might be in the attendees. So if there's any questions, please type those in as we go along. Dave?
Sorry about that. Good evening. Dave Field, Director of Public Works. The Traffic Safety Committee was asked to look at the area of Turnpike and High Street in relation to complaints of excessive speed and noise. We did some traffic counts and evaluated the situation out there. Turnpike Street, in the section we're talking about, has about 8,200 vehicles a day. The average speed was 41 miles an hour, and the 85th percentile speed was 46 miles an hour. The posted speed limit out there is 40 miles an hour. So the vast majority of road users are traveling a reasonable speed. We looked at High Street, which is only about 200 feet long between Turnpike Street and West Bridgewater. Because it's short distance in the proximity to the stop sign and the intersection, we couldn't do a speed count because it wouldn't give us any relevant data. But we did take a look at OCPC's data and found that there was 1,600 vehicles a day in West Bridgewater, and about 10% of those were trucks. We also looked at the crash rate in the area. We found 2 crashes at that intersection over a 5-year period, and the crash rate was significantly lower than the statewide crash rate for unsignalized intersections. And then we also looked at the implications of trucks and truck traffic and whether any type of truck exclusion would be possible or warranted, because 94% of the road of High Street going into Walnut Street in West Bridgewater is not under the control of the town of Easton. We don't believe it's likely that we could even petition for a heavy truck exclusion for High Street. And Turnpike Street is already a designated truck route, and it connects industrial and commercial space in both Brockton, West Bridgewater, and Easton. So we don't believe heavy vehicle exclusion on either of those streets would be possible. So in summary, the other thing was noise. We did look at the noise. When this complaint was made, Turnpike Street had not been resurfaced at that time. It's since been resurfaced with our ultra-thin bonded overlay a couple months ago. And that's actually helped improve roadway noise. The other aspect of noise is trucks stopping and accelerating related to those trucks on High Street at the intersection. Unfortunately, there's not really much we can do about that. There are signs right now in West Bridgewater, right at the Easton town line, that do state no engine brake usage. And that would be one of those things that if that was a continued problem of engine braking, that we could maybe put those signs up, but they're already in existence now in West Bridgewater. So there's really nothing for us to do there as well. So at this time, the Traffic Safety Committee doesn't see any action we can take. And that's our recommendation, is to take no action at this time.
Any comments or question from the board? Okay, we have one comment from Tiffany DeRoche, 88 Turnpike Street, and she's asking, when were the dates of the road assessment? The request was regarding a truck limitation for the specific area of Turnpike Street that's in Easton, in the neighborhood surrounding Turnpike Street, not the Brockton or West Bridgewater sections.
The DPW did the traffic counts within the last year. It wasn't specifically for this request, but we do have a traffic count and truck volume count on Turnpike Street. But as we said, Turnpike Street is already a designated truck route, an alternate route for another heavy vehicle exclusion. And based on interstate commerce, the town of Easton does not have the authority to enact a truck exclusion without Mass DOT approval, and we have to have an alternate route. Because Turnpike Street is an alternate route, and its very nature and the name of it implies, and it's connecting industrial and business zoned areas, we don't believe it would be possible to put a truck exclusion on Turnpike Street.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, we appreciate the Traffic Safety Committee's review on this, and we accept that report. So thank you very much, David, for coming in.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Next is the discussion and vote on a contract amendment number 4 with Perkins Eastman for the wastewater treatment upgrade design permit, bid, and construction and administration services associated with the Easton Early Elementary School project.
Sure, thank you, Dottie. So just while Walter is being brought over, there's a memo in your packet and a proposed 4th contract amendment from PMA Consultants, who are the town's owner's project manager on the Easton Early Elementary School project. What that amendment for is for wastewater treatment upgrade design, permitting, bid, and construction administration for necessary improvements associated with the school's wastewater treatment plant that will be a component of a necessary component of building the new early elementary school. The design amount would be just shy of $200,000. It would be, this is within the existing authorized project budget, which had a $450,000 placeholder for unanticipated additional design costs beyond what was in our original agreement and budgeting at the time of schematic design. This will bring the total cost of the OPM services to $7,963,000. Walter's here to cover anything I missed or answer any questions the board may have. This has already gone through the school planning committee, who have requested that the board execute this, and I recommend that the same is done.
Any comments or questions from any of the board members?
Can you just describe for us and for the folks watching exactly what this entails, Walter?
Specifically, the design is going to be to upgrade the existing systems within that facility. So the pump chambers, some pieces of the force main, the pumps. It's going to replace one of the doors so that the equipment can get in. It'll put in a larger size door, and then some general upgrades within the system itself, due to the fact that it's not operating at its full capacity right now. And in order to sustain the addition of the other 2 elementary schools, it'll need to be working at its full capacity, and one additional leaching area will need to be included, and that's included in the construction scope. So this is just to tie in the design scope, which we knew we need to do prior to finalizing the design.
Thank you.
And Walter, just to be clear, so the actual construction services are separate from this. This is basically just design and construction administration. And then there would be a separate contract, or at least that's the path right now, is that this would be bid and done, and it would be within the total authorization for the project itself,
Yep.
right?
Yep, that's correct. Yep.
Just wanted to make that clear for the board.
Absolutely.
So we're going to get, I expect that we're going to get a number of these through this project, you know, the different amendments. So I appreciate you being here for this, Walter, to explain it to us. If there's no other questions, if somebody would like to make a motion to accept contract amendment number 4 with Perkins Eastman for the wastewater treatment upgrade and design, permit, bid, and construction administration services associated with the Easton Early Elementary School project in the amount of $198,000.
So moved. Okay,
So that was Chuck, and Craig, you second?
Sure.
Okay, and a roll call vote?
Barger, yes.
King, yes?
Sam, yes.
Fulginiti, yes. Great. Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight, Walter.
Not a problem. Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Walter.
Thank you.
Bye.
Next is the discussion of the Town of Easton's bond rating being reaffirmed by Moody's Investor Service.
Sure. So this dovetails into your next item, which Finance Director Nightingale and Treasurer Collector Hawks will speak to, which is bond issuance. But each summer, the town, in preparation of bond issuance, does have. Does anyone else hear that feedback, or is it just me?
I can
You're
hear it.
fading in and out.
We have our creditworthiness analyzed by Moody's each summer in the lead up to our bond issuance as a community. Moody's takes a look at a variety of things: our tax base, the community wealth profile, the town's financial management by the folks on this call, and assigns a rating. And I'm happy to report that our AA3 rating's been reaffirmed, which is a strong rating despite the pretty catastrophic broader economic circumstances being wrought by COVID. And in particular, Moody's, identified our conservative budgeting strategy. The fact that we held a town meeting and adopted a budget at all is not something that can be said for all cities and towns or for all towns in Massachusetts. And that we were able to balance the budget without completely blowing through our stabilization fund that we've worked very hard to double in the past 4 years. So I just felt that was worth noting. We'll put that credit opinion on our website as we always do. And I'm happy to take any questions about that process. If not, we can just move right on to the actual bond issuance. But I didn't want to not note that, that despite the worst economy in almost a century, our creditworthiness has not been downgraded. It's been reaffirmed.
I think it's extraordinary and speaks volumes about you and Linda and Wendy in terms of the work that you've done on behalf of the town.
Chuck, you have any comments?
No, I echo Craig's statement.
Mark?
I echo Craig's sentiment as well. Well done.
This is great work. It definitely shows that the investment that the town, the residents of Easton have wanted to make in our community is paying off in great dividends for that great strong credit rating, and also the financial policies that this board has voted along the way with your guidance, Connor. These are all pieces of keeping that a strong rating. So thank you to everybody for the work on that. Item 11, a discussion and vote to approve the issuance and other details of the general obligation bonds dated August 12th, 2020, and to sign related closing documents.
I can take that from here. Hello, everyone. Good to see everybody.
Linda.
So we're here for our annual borrowing loan issuances. We sold our bonds on July 21st. We had 6 bidders, which I think is a good sign of things to come. The winning bidder was Robert W. Baird and Company. They had a total interest cost, which was really unbelievable, 1.276% over the life of all of the bonds. The financial advisors were very, very happy with that. They were just ecstatic that we could get such a good rate on our bonds. The range of total interest cost was between 1.29% and 1.51% before adjustments were made for the premiums and whatnot, which is what brought ours down to the 1.27%. We did get a premium of $445,000. The premium pays for our costs of issuance and then is prorated across the purposes, and it reduces the cost of each purpose a certain amount. So that was also a good sign. The purposes, the specific purposes were outlined in a memo that you received last week. A lot of fairly typical stuff, lots of our annual borrowing. There is some items that we're making permanent. When we last met in June, we were doing a bond anticipation note, which is temporary financing. At this time of the year, we do the permanent financing, and a portion of the bigger projects is permanently financed with a bond, not a bond anticipation note, but with the actual bond. And that is included here. I'll list them: Foundry Street water main replacement, the wastewater treatment plant at Five Corners in the Five Corners district, sewer design in 5 corners, sewer construction in 5 corners, DPW municipal facilities capital improvements, DPW pavement management. Again, some of the things that we keep seeing each year. The school roof replacement, the turf and track at Moscato Stadium, vehicle replacement for the DPW with a hook lift and a backhoe, and then the refunding of the 2010 bonds, which I wanted to spend a little bit more time on because this is a little bit different. So this year, because the interest rates were so low, we had an opportunity to take advantage of call features of our 2010 issuances. Usually after 10 years, bonds are eligible for refunding, or an easier way of saying it, refinancing, which we did do. We took the balances that were still due on our 2000 bonds. We still had 7 years left. We took that balance, we rewrote it, and with the difference in interest rates that we're going to get, we're going to save upwards of $203,000 in interest costs over the next 7 years, which is the remaining life of the bonds that were outstanding for that 2010 issue. So that's great. Yeah, that's just great. We just, I can't say very much more about that, except that that is a great move that we were able to take advantage of that. You were emailed a full set of the documents that we'll be signing tonight with all of the detail. The signature pages are available for signing in the Corona room, I believe. And I think we went through this with the ban in June. We need a majority of the select board to sign the documents, and the vote, because we do have to take a vote for this borrowing. The language of the vote, which is fairly long, is going to be incorporated by reference. So the vote itself is in the minutes, and that will suffice. We don't need to read the entire vote, the entire text of the vote.
Okay, terrific.
Yeah.
Any members have any questions or comments?
Yeah, Linda, it's Craig Barger. I'm looking at the vote of the select board, and I'm seeing the years 2021 to 2040, and I'm seeing 5% interest rate. Is that's
the coupon rate? That is the coupon rate for that one. The bonds, as you will find out, are issued in smaller denominations, and that is the interest rate. But once you take into consideration the premium that we got, then that is why the interest rate, even though it's 5% this year, and then 5%, perhaps 4%, and then 3% later on, over time and with consideration of the premium, the total interest cost comes down to the interest rate of 1.27%.
Thank you.
Chuck, any questions, comments?
No, I'm good, thanks.
Mark?
No.
I'm sad that Tom's missing this. He loves these nights when we talk about saving money and refinancing. So thank you so much, Linda. We really appreciate your hard work on this. All good news.
Yeah, it is. It is.
All right. If somebody would like to make the motion that's listed in our packet.
I move to adopt the vote of the select board as written for the bonds dated August 12th, 2020, and incorporate the text of such vote into the minutes of this meeting.
Second, King?
So that's Craig and Chuck, and the roll call vote starting with you, Craig.
Barger, yes.
King, yes.
Lamb, yes.
Fulginiti, yes. Thank you. And
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Linda.
Thank you, Wendy.
And thank you, Wendy. The standing COVID update from Connor.
Dottie. I will try to be brief. As has become our practice, I try to give the board just a snapshot of the things that we are working on here that are more COVID specific, because it's still impacting lots of what we do on a day-to-day basis. the Easton Emergency Management Association was activated back in March and has stayed the course since then. We still connect multiple times a week with officials from fire, police, public health, schools to maintain relatively close to constant communication on the continually evolving standards for the way that we do business, and particularly a focus right now is obviously pretty much all eyes in the Commonwealth are on school districts who by the end of the year are required to submit a variety, 3 specifically different plans for reopening schools this fall, a completely remote model, an in-person model, and a hybrid model. So that is the main focus of the schools are working tremendously hard on that, and they are going to be giving a presentation. Superintendent Dr. Brawl will be giving a presentation on what those draft plans look like for Easton Public Schools at tomorrow night's school committee meeting. So I recommend the board, press, and any interested parents, of course, watch that school committee meeting. So as is the case with each meeting, we kind of look at things from big picture and drill down. This is where we were last week in the United States. Had about 3.3 million cases, about 135,000 folks had died. As of last Friday, we had passed 4 million cases and over 140,000 deaths. The rate of daily confirmation remains quite high in the United States. Again, this is a picture from your last meeting on the 13th, 2 weeks ago, where the positive rate, that's the percentage of tests being administered coming back positive. Or I'm sorry, this is the total cases per day. Started really lifting off in July. At that time, we were still below 60,000 cases per day. As we now know, we broke 70,000 cases per day on multiple occasions. Since then, as of last Friday, the 7-day rolling average was 67,000 new cases of COVID being confirmed in the United States every single day. We made it a point in the last meeting to identify that this is not solely a function of just increased testing, that the actual rate of tests coming back positive outside of the Northeast of the United States is increasing after dropping in June. And that has stayed elevated around 8.5%. For comparison, Massachusetts, this weekend, actually, the rate started ticking up marginally, but we're usually hovering around 1.5% to 2% positivity rate. There are places in the United States well into the teens and I think into the 20s. That's not something public health experts like to see. That indicates that spread is pretty close to out of control in those communities. Again, thankfully, that is not currently the case in the Northeast. This is what the positivity rate map in the United States looked like at our last meeting. It's color coded, pretty standard traffic light color coding here. Northeast generally around or below 2% positive rate. The Sun Belt really getting hit pretty hard, over 10%. This is what it looks like today. The Northeast remains with much lower rates of positivity. And some other states, unfortunately, in the South are joining the Sun Belt with rates over 10%. So again, none of this is stated here to be negative about the Northeast. I think the Commonwealth has done one of the best jobs in the nation fighting this. But it's worth understanding the broader context. So in Massachusetts, we have about 114,000 total cases as of last Friday. About 8,500 folks have lost their lives, and the positive rate is, as I said before, hovering about 1.75%. Over the weekend, there was some news that we were breaking over 200 cases a day, and that there was some clusters beginning to be identified. I don't know if you saw the story in Chatham. There was basically one house party that had dozens and dozens of folks end up having to be quarantined. Really kind of reinforcing that as much as the Commonwealth has done a good job to get a grip on this, that part of that good job is folks adhering to public health guidance, keeping their distance, wearing masks when they can't, and not letting their guard down. Thankfully, it's not April anymore, but the virus is not any less contagious. And so, and the data does not seem to support that it's seasonal in any way. So the idea that it's sunny out, it's nice out, we're all exhausted of this, of course, but that you can just kind of go to large parties, not follow guidance, not keep your distance, not wear masks is not the right thing to do. Sorry, I just covered this. This chart shows what our daily cases in the Commonwealth were. We were well over 2,000 for a period in April. Thankfully, that's dropped down below 200 and is just starting to marginally pick up this past weekend. And recognizing that the governor has taken a few steps. One is that there are now 16 cities in the Commonwealth, or 16 communities, where their rates are higher than the rest of the Commonwealth, that they have rolled out expanded testing opportunities for folks who live there. Easton is not one because we do not have an elevated positive rate compared to the state average, which is good news for us. But so that's a program the state is launching to encourage folks to continue getting tested as part of their general policy of test, track, and isolate. And the governor also issued stricter executive orders last Friday, building on existing travel guidance. This is now an executive order that anyone entering Massachusetts, including residents who leave and come back, who don't meet much more limited exceptions, starting on the 1st of August, which is Saturday, need to provide their information to the Department of Public Health through the Massachusetts travel form and quarantine for 14 days, or provide proof of negative COVID testing. This now comes attached with fines from the Commonwealth, $500 a day. And what this, sorry, didn't mean to click the link. This just shows a kind of increasing seriousness with what was kind of an honor system recommendation on travel that the governor has issued in advance of colleges and schools reopening to try to keep a better handle on where things are and the hot spots around the United States where folks may be coming from. So as of last week, Easton was at about 281 cases. Thankfully, the growth in our cases on a daily basis has largely plateaued over the summer. Through the end of last month, 35 residents had passed away of coronavirus. The Commonwealth is still in phase 3. The governor and his administration have stated in numerous press events that moving into phase 4, the kind of new normal, is not something that will happen with the speed at which we move through phases 1, 2, and 3. So this is likely where we all will be for a while. At the local level, our office continues to administer the kind of rapid issuance of expanded outdoor dining permits for restaurants. You see a lot more outdoor dining in Easton now, which is great. It encourages folks who are going to go patronize one of these businesses to be able to do so responsibly outdoors. Board of Health is in constant contact with a variety of other business types in the community, providing them support. We're continuing to provide our services remotely and have our board meetings remotely. I'm working with our department heads and conducting an assessment as far as what type of phase reopening makes sense for more administrative services, particularly given that nearly all of them have been able to successfully be offered remotely with kind of limited exceptions with handoffs and parking lots and things like that, certain vital records and things of that nature. Prior to that, we last week happy to report that our office pushed out, we expanded the amount of webinar platform accounts we have with Zoom and pushed out guidance. A majority of our boards and committees don't have paid staff. We simply don't have resources for that. And they were all very patient through the spring months as we were really devoting all of our effort to COVID responses and then planning for the budget and town meeting. Those boards were very patient and were largely not holding meetings because we did not have staff or the Zoom accounts to equip them to do it on their own. Town administrator put together a really good guide for those folks, and we have expanded those resources and provided those boards and committees to be off and running so that they can get back to their business starting now, although remotely. So I'm pretty happy about that. We have a variety of town staff interfacing with Easton Public Schools to provide their input where sought on a variety of facilities and health planning as the schools undertake their pretty monumental task of assessing different methods for providing education in the fall. We've really, I think, benefited throughout this crisis of having already had a very good relationship across departments and with the schools. And really, I can't say enough about the department heads of the superintendent for how well everyone has worked together to try to do the right thing for the community throughout this. For Parks and Rec, all of our parks and fields are open for use, provided that people will be responsible. Please keep distance from non-family members and wear masks if you can't. Last week, the rec department also was able to publish new guidance and facilities use forms and field use forms for civic groups and others to use and rent our fields and facilities as they would typically do in any summer. Obviously, now there's significantly more attached to it as far as required information tracking by the organizers in the event that there is a contact tracing need. We worked with town council and health officials to get something that made some sense here. And is going to allow some people to get back to some approved activities under the Commonwealth's reopening plan for recreation and sports, which is great. Public safety, public works have been operational the entire time, continues to be the case. All of our inspectional services are operating. The administrative things as far as contacting them is remote, telephone, email, but they are doing inspections in person with appropriate mask application and keeping projects and things moving. We will have likely at your next meeting a contract for some large bulk purchases of PPE to create a multi-month cache for ourselves of emergency supplies in the event that there is any kind of resurgence of COVID in the fall. And frankly, these will just be good public health materials to have in the event of any major public health crisis, because we have not, of course, because it's not over, had time to do a tabletop debrief of this whole situation. And I think we'll need about 2 months to do that once things are under control. But one of the things, obviously, that we learned, not just we kind of formally the town, but all of us as residents of this state and citizens of this country learned the hard way when things really were blowing up in March and April, is that there are agencies like MEMA and FEMA that exist to provide support, and for a variety of reasons that probably come across differently depending on the persuasions of who you ask, we had a great difficulty in the Commonwealth getting adequate PPE where it needed to be. And so we will have our own smaller cache of that we'll have access to in the undesirable circumstance that we need it, and the supply line is crushed again. So that's it. So again, I think the really, honestly, most important thing I would direct people's attention to is to tune into the school committee meeting tomorrow night at 5 o'clock. Dr. Cabral and her team, including staff, educators, parents, school committee members, have been working incredibly hard on trying to pull together as best as possible plans that are in accordance with the Department of Education's guidance for schools. So that'll be tomorrow at 5. I encourage folks to tune into that. I know the schools have been communicating directly with parents through their callback system and emails, and it sounds redundant, but I really encourage people to read what is being sent to them. I know that's a lot to take in. It's been an overwhelming few months, but there's a lot of good people doing their absolute best to try to do the right thing on this. So I would recommend you. That's all I have on this, unless anyone has questions.
Connor, one question I have, that PPE expenditure is part of the CARES Act, is that correct?
Correct. We will be able to write that off with CARES funding.
That includes some of the PPEs the schools are going to need or may need?
No, this is the contract that will come to you is basically for municipal and emergency responses. The schools are concurrently working on their own supply purchases that they will need for a variety of things, whether it's technology, PPE, that will also be CARES eligible to our knowledge. I mean, technically, in administration and finance could say no. We're obviously doing our best and communicating with finance department and the business department of the schools to try to make sure that as much of what we purchase, whether it's for the fire department or the schools, is CARES eligible. And we'll do our best to kind of aggressively maximize that. But at the end of the day, we're going to purchase what we are required to try to keep people as safe as we can.
Thank you.
Chuck,
I have no questions.
Mark?
No questions.
I guess I would just say I'm really, really worried, like almost as worried as I was in the beginning. The reports that I read from FEMA don't say if there's a second wave, they say when there's a second wave. And with the amount of college students coming from other parts of the country into Massachusetts, you know, while there is a travel advisory, I'm wondering, you know, how enforceable that really is. And I feel like people are just in general letting their guard down. I know that I myself feel, you know, more back to normal, if you will, except for wearing a mask when I go to the store. But I feel like we really have to remind everybody to really keep up the hygiene, keep up wearing the masks. You know, some of the places that I go when I'm in a store, I see they're not wearing the masks right. And these are managers, customers that are coming in, walking around without masks. So it's just super important that we really continue to keep the pressure on this.
Good points.
So with that, there's been no new temporary outdoor dining permits since the last meeting, Connor?
Not to my belief, Mike, have there been?
So there has actually been one the day after the last meeting. Our most
You're muted again, Mike.
Sorry, I moved my mouse. The day after your last meeting, there was one permit that was issued to Shino. And at this point, that's 12 total. And we have not received any further applications. So we don't anticipate any more in the immediate future unless we were to receive additional applications.
Okay, great. Before we do select board notes, I just want to make sure that that I remember the minutes. So we have the minutes of May 18th, 2020 in our packet. Has everyone had a chance to review them? And if so, if somebody would like to make a motion to accept those minutes?
So moved.
Second, Chuck?
Craig and Chuck, and the roll call starting with you, Craig.
Barger, yes.
King, yes.
Lamb, yes.
And Fulginiti, yes. So on to select board notes, starting with Craig, if anybody has any comments or notes they'd like to make.
None at this moment. Thank you.
Chuck?
I have none.
Mark?
I have none. Thank you.
All right, I just have a couple of comments. I always look through the town crier before these meetings.
You froze, Dottie.
Voting early in person or voting on election day. You probably received something in the mail this week like I did to see if you wanted to do mail-in voting. So look for those cards and respond accordingly, but definitely check out the town's website for that important information. The state primary is September 1st at the high school, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. The deadline to register to vote for that is August 22nd. So if you have college students or anyone that's 18 or older, make sure that they're registered to vote. The presidential election is November 3rd, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. also at Oliver Ames High School. And the deadline to register to vote for that is October 24th. And the other thing that I think is noteworthy is the census. It's really important that people fill out their census. That's how a lot of the funding is determined in our town, and it's really important for us to have an accurate number. So if you've already filled out your census, thank you. And if you haven't, make sure you get on that. It's really important to our community. So with that said, Connor, did you have anything else?
I do not.
All right. Well, I will look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second,
Craig and Chuck, all in favor?
Barger, yes?
King, yes.
Yes.
And Fulginiti, yes. Thank you, everybody, for a
Thank you
great.
all.
And
Thank
we'll
you.
Good evening and stay safe.
Good night, all.